Ask most instructional designers their book recommendations. I bet you are going to hear Map It by Cathy Moore over and over and over again. Well, in today's video, I'm going to give you my review of Cathy Moore's Map It. Hi friends, my name is Vanessa, and on this channel, we help aspiring instructional designers and e-learning developers just like you get off of the sidelines and get into the L&D game. And one of those ways is by learning more about the instructional design field. And so one thing we always ask each other is, where are you going to, keep up to date with sourcing and with, the newest trends, and, what is it, what philosophies can I trust, and what is good and useful out in the field? And one of those things is the action mapping process and the utilization of Cathy Moore's book, Map It. If you don't currently own it, I will link it down below so you can grab your own copy, but I definitely recommend it as something that you should own. So I have to say, if nothing else, this book really gets down to the heart of how adults think about teaching other adults and where we're all seriously going wrong. And it's something that we talk about over and over again in instructional design, and it's the idea of getting out of this school model and just lecturing at you and giving you all the information instead of bringing you into the learning and letting you be participatory in that learning, and understanding that learning really doesn't just happen in the classroom or in the in an e-learning module. It really happens through so many different modalities, and it's not just a matter of giving the information, but how do we integrate that information into their everyday, and having that information where they need it, and understanding that sometimes it isn't the training that's the problem, it's the process or the system or the workflow, whatever it is that you are the problem that you're currently trying to solve. So like I mentioned earlier, a lot of organizations really think of learning in that straight school model, right? You give the learning, you take a test, you figure out where the student is in their learning, and then you move on, right? They are trained, they know the information. And if that were the case, we'd all just be course creators and not instructional designers, and we would throw a quiz at the end, test our students, and then there'd be no compliance issues, right? There'd be no sexual harassment happening in the workplace. Everything would be running smoothly and no one would have any questions, right? Well, we know that that's not working. That model doesn't work, and frankly, it doesn't always work in the school setting either. But I digress. And we need to really think about how to get the learning to the learner, and how to actually make it something that they take in and they continue on and they utilize day in and day out, and they don't just see it and forget it.
Hi, I'm Dory.
So if the school model is not working, then what does work? Well, we want to think about how to create activities, right, and resources to help aid them in their role. So, for example, if you're looking at a policy, maybe you need to rewrite that policy because it's not clear. It's not a matter of people don't understand the policy. It's poorly written. And maybe the issue isn't, with communication necessarily from the employee to the manager. It's the manager needs some sort of upskilling, and you need to look at your management training, not necessarily at the frontline workers. There's a lot of different factors that go into why there are problems in the workplace, and it's not always training's fault. So the book opens, and it's one of the first examples that I really thought was impactful was the example about training on how to pass, I believe, with scalpels correctly, in a hospital. And I think that through a training course, you can create some sort of drag and drop interaction where it shows you how to do it, or you can, tell learners how to, pass a scalpel. But when you're in the moment, right, and when you're in surgery, you're in the room, it is so easy to forget everything, throw everything out the window, right? Because there is the patient that's actually right in front of you, which you don't get to simulate in a training or in an e-learning or when you're being talked to, right? And then there are all these other people around you, right? So there's talking and things are moving very fast, and God forbid there is, something, happening on during the surgery that you have to pass a scalpel very fast. And so it's so easy to understand that it is easy to pass them incorrectly, and it's easy to not remember how you were trained in that moment because your training didn't simulate all these other things that were happening around you. What I really enjoyed about that example, it's that reminder that the learners, the employees, they knew how to pass the scalpel correctly. It's just that in the moment, it's so easy to forget or to pass or to let other things that are happening around you cloud your judgment. And that's really the crux of issues in learning and creating these environments and organizations of learning and really understanding and retaining information rather than just spitting out information at others. I think that this book really brings into the forefront the actual issues. It's not so theory-based, which I really liked. It's hard facts, right? There's actual examples as you go through the entire book, and you can actually see how applicable it is. The interesting thing about my take as I'm reading it is I never went to school for instructional design. I don't have my master's in it. I graduated with my bachelor's in communication and political science, and I ended up getting a job in training and instructional design. And so for me, a lot of my experience is laid and is baked out in actual experience, right? So I didn't read a theory and then think about how to apply it. And that's where I think that this book is so instrumental to instructional designers that went to school for it, because your books, I've seen them, it's so theory-based. That's not what actually happens in the corporate environment, right? And it's kind of that like Utopia, where everything's perfect and there's no politics that you have to worry about and things like that. And I think that this book can be that first step once you graduate. It's a nice complement to going to school, because it's going to give you the straight facts of how it is, how you can utilize action mapping and how you can utilize this tool in an actual work environment, right? It's not so theory-based and so idealistic. It really gets to the root of that there's actual issues that you have to deal with in politics, right? And, competing priorities and whatever the case may be in a corporate environment. And that's as most real life as I've seen in a book. So I'm not going to go into the action mapping process, which we can definitely go into, how to utilize action mapping and walk through an actual example. So if you're interested in that, please leave a comment down below or give this video a thumbs up and we can walk through an example together. But in this review, I did want to just touch on one thing that I was a little about with the book. Overall, I think it's wonderful. But it's the testing it out with the client advice that I was like, okay, I get that. I agree. But I think that you pick the right client in order to do that. And I think that if you're more experienced in the field, yes, you can absolutely, which client you have more of that flexibility or leeway with to kind of play around with a new way of, conceptualizing the need for training, right? And addressing the root problem. But if you're new in the field, you probably haven't built that consultative, and I'm going to struggle with this word the entire video, but those skills just yet in order to be able to kind of set your foot down and say, we're going to take this approach rather than you giving me what you think the problem is and you giving me the content and me just developing it for you. I know you've seen in other videos in the past, including my Confession of Instructional Designer, which I'll link above. If you haven't checked it out, I recommend that you check it out after this video. Do it! But I definitely recommend you check that out, because I do touch upon the fact that, very much often in instructional design, you kind of become an order taker. And in the very beginning of your career, it is easy to do that. So when you are in the beginning of your career, it's hard when you're just trying to get work, right? And build up that experience, build up your resume, and just establish yourself as the expert. It is very hard to be like, hey, I know that, you all think you know what the problem is, but I'm going to show you that you actually don't know what the problem is. And let's walk through this whole new process of how to, address this problem. And let's take a step back from you telling me that you want a course and you know that training is the answer. Let's take a step back and really analyze what the root cause or root problem is. That is a very difficult conversation to have with clients. Some it's easier than others, and I won't lie, I can't have that conversation with all of my clients. There are some that it's like, okay, you know best, because they're just not open to feedback and open to it. And will I stop working for them? I mean, maybe eventually, but if they call and I need work, I'm not going to exactly turn them down. So, that's just real life, sometimes you are the order taker. So again, I'm getting into a tangent, but check out that Confessions of an Instructional Designer video for more on that. But yeah, I think that it's a great concept to build up to. And it's great in the beginning when you're working through, new engagements and you've really established yourself as an instructional designer and you've been able to utilize the process with, maybe a volunteer organization that you work with, right? Or a nonprofit that's looking for some work, and they might be a little bit more open to trying a new approach to attacking this training problem, right? And I think that you can find organizations like that to use this this tool as task with, that you may not want to test out with the client right away. You want to, get your footing and get your ground yourself in that learning. So I definitely recommend looking for other ways to practice this skill rather than going to a client directly. Now, once you have that experience and you have some, case studies and you have some proof and some results, then that's all information that's great to bring to, new engagements, new clients, and really help establish and ground yourself as an instructional designer to say, you know what, there's this approach, action mapping. I want to try it. We're going to use it. I want to try it and I want to use this process, and let's really discover what the issue is, that's causing this problem that you all are seeing, and let's start there, and then identify the different mediums that you'll need in order to address this problem. It doesn't have to just be learning or an online course. It could be the fact that you need a job aid, right? It could be the fact that like in the book, you need a poster to just remind, people how to, pass the scalpel correctly, whatever the case may be. There are other ways, and that could also be less costly than creating a really expensive e-learning module. If you're going to price out a job aid versus an e-learning module, well, the job aid is going to be a lot less expensive and more cost effective for your client. And it could yield a better result, which then means the client's going to want to continue to call you back because you were able to save them money. You treated them right. You didn't try to sell them, for this huge e-learning because you knew it was going to be a bigger profit. You actually gave them a solution that was actually going to move the needle, and then the needle moved. So they're going to want to continue those services so that you can, so they can continue to get more return on their investment on you. And then it ends up becoming more work than that e-learning course. So definitely recommend, building up those cases through other methods. So organizations that you volunteer with, a nonprofit, a small business, something that you can test out with someone, and then build up your case, build up your experience, figure out the sticky points and really figure out how you own that process, because every process, whether whatever method that you utilize, it's yours, right? You have to put your unique spin to it, and you attack it from a different place than maybe others would. And you have, for like the action mapping process, maybe you figure out that the whiteboard doesn't work for you for like the beginning stages. Maybe you figure out that you prefer a Miro board or something like that. Maybe you just love pen and paper and that's the way that works best for you. All of those things are little kinks that you can work out, get the pros and the cons, so that when you are in front of a client, it's like, I'm a pro, I've been doing this for years, and let's do some action mapping. So I definitely recommend doing that. But I think that overall, you can get to the point where you're utilizing this approach with clients. And not every, even when you're an expert, not every client is going to want to go with this approach, and that's fine. Some clients you are just going to have to kind of go with the approach that they feel is best. But then there are going to be those opportunities. And as you continue to talk about this service that you offer and the results that you've been able to get for other clients, you'll really see that more clients will come to you to work on this approach. And they'll talk to each other. Clients, they all have friends and they all talk, and you'll get more referrals that way for this approach that you're utilizing. So I definitely recommend it. And the nice thing about the book is that it really breaks down the process in a really approachable way so that you can take pieces of it and inject it in projects that maybe it's not don't want to do a full action mapping and you don't have that liberty, but instead maybe you can take a few things that you've learned throughout the book and inject it in pieces of your design process, right? In your development process. And so maybe when you're working with SMEs, you're asking questions like, what do you need to do? And, what makes that job so difficult? And really get to the root of the problem through those SME interviews. And then what you can do is maybe the client has recommended, has said to you that they want to do a full e-learning module on something. And that's not really going to move the needle because it's that one and done training event. If it's within scope and budget, maybe you recommend a job aid or some sort of supplemental material in order to really help move the needle based on what you know from those subject matter interviews. So they don't even realize that you're injecting action mapping techniques or solutions through your own process. And they just kind of think like, oh, okay, yeah, that's actually a really great idea if we do that. And that the e-learning module is not going to move the needle, but what will move the needle is that job aid when they are, in the moment and need to, make a decision, or they need to pass that scalpel, right? So all of those things, are actually the parts that are moving the needle, and you can talk to that by doing some supplemental, evaluation and surveying after the fact of the learners. Now, those types of things, suggest it as an option. And if they want to and they have the budget for it, you can definitely add it to your, do a change order and do to your scope of work, but do not offer it for free. It is something that your client definitely needs to pay for. So overall, I say the book is definitely a great read. And for me, it's the real deal. It's real life. And that is what is important to me. As you know, I'm a straight shooter and I like to, approach things in a real manner and how things actually function day to day. And, I was going through as I was prepping for this video and I saw some Amazon reviews where, someone said that, it's a shame that it's not as widely accepted as, through organizations like ATD. And for me, that's a shame. I think that this should be something that is taught more. And this is something that people need to talk about more because this is real. This is actually like things that can move the needle in corporate environments, as opposed to these really grandiose theories that just don't work out because of time, budget, just like the thought process that happens and just all those politics and things that happen in organizations day in and day out. So for all my ID newbies, get this book and put it on your bookshelf. Remember, the link is down below. Are you ready to take your freelance game to the next level? Well, join the Freelance Learning and Development Network on Facebook and connect with other L&D professionals and you can get exclusive support from me. Friends, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my next video. Bye.